You think your home is your sanctuary, until someone decides it isn't. When Sarah left town for a short work trip, she expected to return to her cozy suburban home, her small front garden blooming just the way she'd left it. But instead, she came back to find bare soil, ripped up flowers, and a chilling HOA notice taped to her door. What she didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning, and the real shock was still hiding in her mailbox. When Sarah stepped out of her car and saw the empty patch where her vibrant little garden used to be, her heart dropped into her stomach. Rows of tulips, lavender bushes, and hand-painted stepping stones, all gone. She blinked, thinking maybe she'd parked at the wrong house, but the address was hers. Confused and panicked, she rushed to the front porch, hoping for some kind of explanation. That's when she spotted it, a bright yellow notice taped crookedly to her front door. In bold black letters, it read, "Unapproved vegetation removal. HOA compliance required." Sarah tore the notice down and scanned it furiously, trying to make sense of the legal-sounding jargon. According to the HOA, her garden had been in violation of aesthetic regulations, and a member-led committee had authorized its removal. But there was one problem: Sarah was a member of the HOA, and no one had ever mentioned anything about her garden before. Then she saw the name signed at the bottom, Karen Mitchell, HOA Landscape Chair. Ah, Karen. Every neighborhood has one, but this one had made it her personal mission to protect property values at any cost. Known for patrolling the streets with a clipboard and taking photos of people's lawns, Karen had a reputation for micromanaging everything, from the shade of your mailbox to the length of your grass. But Sarah had never expected her to go this far. Sarah stormed over to her neighbor Lisa's house next door, desperate for answers. Lisa opened the door cautiously, glancing over her shoulder as though afraid of being overheard. "I tried to stop her," Lisa whispered. "Karen showed up with 2 guys from the landscaping crew while you were away. She said the board voted on removing your garden, but no one else on the board even knew about it." Sarah's jaw tightened. That meant Karen acted completely on her own, bypassing procedure, and using her position to make unilateral decisions. But before Sarah could process the betrayal, Lisa lowered her voice even further. "You should have seen her, Sarah. She was enjoying it. She kept saying your messy flowers were bringing down the neighborhood's image." That was the final straw. Sarah grabbed her phone and called the HOA office, demanding an explanation. But instead of an apology, she got Karen herself on the line. "Sarah, your garden violated HOA guidelines." "End of discussion," Karen said, her tone smug and unbothered. Sarah clenched her fist, barely holding back her frustration. "Karen, there are no guidelines about gardens. You had no right." Karen chuckled softly before hanging up without another word. It was then Sarah realized, this wasn't just about flowers. This was about power. And if Karen thought she could get away with it, she had another thing coming. That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the empty patch of dirt outside her window. The more she replayed Karen's smug tone in her head, the more determined she became to fight back. She decided she wasn't going to let this go, not when Karen had destroyed something so personal to her. The first step was gathering evidence. Sarah pulled up the HOA's official bylaws from the community website and spent hours combing through them, line by line. She searched for anything, that could justify what Karen had done. But no matter how far she read, there was nothing. No clause about front gardens. No restrictions on flower types. Not a single mention of landscaping needing pre-approval. And yet, there was Karen's signature on that notice. The next morning, Sarah printed copies of the bylaws and walked door to door, talking to her neighbors. What she discovered shocked her even more. No one had ever heard of this so-called landscape committee that Karen claimed had voted on her garden removal. In fact, 3 HOA board members told her directly that they weren't even informed about any vote. Karen had acted entirely on her own authority, and lied about it. "Lisa, her neighbor, leaned closer as they talked over coffee. "There's more you should know," she whispered. "Karen's been bragging at HOA meetings that she's cleaning up the neighborhood before the next property audit. She thinks if she cracks down hard enough, she'll get promoted to HOA president." That set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind. This wasn't random harassment. Karen was building a personal power grab, using homeowners as pawns to look like a tough enforcer. Sarah realized that if Karen got away with this, she'd become unstoppable. Fueled by anger, Sarah began compiling a file, photos of her garden before and after, witness statements from Lisa and other neighbors, and printed copies of the bylaws proving there were no violations. Every detail was carefully documented, ready to present to the HOA board. But then, something unexpected happened. 2 days later, Sarah received an anonymous envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of an internal HOA email chain. Her hands trembled as she read it. It was from Karen, instructing the landscaping crew to remove non-compliant vegetation from Lot 16 immediately, even though she knew there was no violation. But the email went further. In one line, Karen bragged to another board member that Sarah's garden removal would set an example and discourage other homeowners from resisting HOA control. Sarah's stomach turned. This wasn't just personal. This was a calculated intimidation tactic. And now, Sarah had proof. What Karen didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just going to expose her, she was going to make sure the entire HOA saw exactly how far Karen had crossed the line. The night of the HOA board meeting, Sarah arrived early, clutching her thick binder of evidence like a weapon. The small community center buzzed with nervous energy as homeowners packed the room, whispering among themselves. Rumors about Karen's power play had been spreading for days, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Karen, meanwhile, sat confidently at the head of the long table, arms folded, wearing her signature red blazer like armor. She barely glanced at Sarah as she walked in, but the smirk tugging at her lips told Sarah everything she needed to know. Karen still thought she was untouchable. When the meeting officially began, Karen launched into her rehearsed speech about community aesthetics and maintaining property values. She framed Sarah's garden as a threat to neighborhood uniformity, claiming she had acted in everyone's best interest. But the more she spoke, the more restless the crowd became. Finally, Sarah stood. "Enough," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "You broke the rules, Karen. And I have proof." All eyes turned to Sarah as she opened her binder and began laying out her case step by step. First came the photos of her garden before its destruction, vibrant and neatly maintained. Then came the bylaws, highlighted sections showing no landscaping restrictions whatsoever. Gasps rippled through the room as Sarah revealed signed statements from board members confirming there had never been any vote. Karen shifted uncomfortably, but Sarah wasn't done yet. "And then there's this." Sarah held up the anonymous email chain for the entire room to see. She read aloud the damning line where Karen instructed the landscapers to set an example by targeting Sarah's property. The room erupted. Neighbors shouted, demanding answers. Board members whispered urgently among themselves. Karen's face flushed crimson as she slammed her hand on the table. "This is being taken completely out of context," she snapped, but no one was buying it anymore. At that moment, one of the board members cleared his throat and spoke gravely. "Karen, you not only violated Sarah's rights, but you also overstepped HOA authority. This is beyond internal discipline. We're required by law to report unauthorized property alterations to the State Housing Commission." For the first time all night, Karen's confidence cracked. Her smirk vanished. She stammered something about just following protocol, but the damage was done. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a letter from the State Commission confirming they were investigating Karen's actions. And then came the bombshell. Karen had been personally fined $3,500 for violating homeowners' property rights. When Sarah opened that letter, she smiled for the first time in weeks. Karen, once feared, was now humiliated. But Sarah had a feeling this wasn't the end, because when power-hungry people get cornered, they don't always back down quietly. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that HOA meeting still lingered across the neighborhood. Karen, once the self-proclaimed guardian of community standards, had become the talk of every doorstep and driveway. Her red blazer, once a symbol of control, was now a badge of embarrassment. The state fine of $3,500 hit her hard, but the damage to her reputation was far worse. Sarah, meanwhile, became somewhat of a local hero. Neighbors stopped her during evening walks to thank her for standing up to Karen. Homeowners who had once been afraid to challenge the HOA now felt empowered. They began comparing stories, and as it turned out, Sarah wasn't Karen's first victim. Over the past year, Karen had quietly issued dozens of compliance notices that were never approved by the board, each one designed to intimidate homeowners into doing exactly what she wanted. Fueled by frustration, a group of neighbors came together to formally petition for Karen's removal from the HOA board. It was a tense, weeks-long battle, but when the vote finally came, the results were undeniable. Karen was stripped of her position. But even with Karen gone, Sarah wasn't ready to let things rest. She filed a formal complaint with the State Housing Commission, pushing them to review not just her case, but Karen's entire history of misconduct. A few months later, the commission concluded its investigation and found multiple violations. Karen had abused her authority, misrepresented HOA policies, and misused HOA funds to pay for unauthorized landscaping services. The state didn't hold back. Karen was banned from holding any HOA-related position for 5 years in order to pay back over $7,000 in misused HOA funds. For Sarah, it wasn't just about the money or the fines. It was about something much bigger, reclaiming her right to enjoy her own home without fear, intimidation, or manipulation. She rebuilt her garden from scratch, planting even more flowers than before, each one a small symbol of victory. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came one sunny afternoon, when Sarah caught Karen slowly driving past her house. Karen's window was rolled halfway down, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word, and Sarah didn't either. She just smiled, sipping her iced tea, surrounded by a garden more vibrant than ever. For the first time, the neighborhood felt like a community again, united, resilient, and free from Karen's grip. And yet, Sarah knew this wasn't an isolated case. Across the country, HOAs were filled with power-hungry board members who thought they could get away with anything. And that's where HOA Case Files comes in. If you've ever faced an HOA nightmare like Sarah's, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next case we uncover might just be happening in your neighborhood.